Hello, good evening, everyone. I am Devesh Lathi, the program manager here at the Next Genius Foundation, and I welcome all of you to this webinar. So, a little bit about Next Genius. Next Genius is a registered charitable trust, and we help high school students with scholarships for their undergraduate education in the US. Over the past 5 years, we have had over 117 Next Genius scholars to study on a Next Genius scholarship at universities in the US. The application for this year's program is already open. Grade 12 students and gap year students who are interested in learning more about us can visit our website and know about the application process. So welcome all of you. Welcome Stephen to this profile building fair. And as all of you apply to colleges abroad, you'll see that colleges, highly selective colleges, look at a lot more than just academics, your high school grades, and your test scores. A lot of students who apply to these colleges will have stellar scores in their tests, will have amazing, SATs or ACT scores or great scores in their board exams and things like that. But what are the things that differentiate these students, these applicants, when compared with other students like themselves? So one of those factors that is what the reason behind our profile building fair is. Here we bring to you a lot of such opportunities which will help you demonstrate how you're different and differentiate yourself actually from other applicants. So today we have Mr. Stephen Turban from Lumiere Research Scholars, and he is going to talk to you about how a research program is one of those interesting activities which will help you demonstrate how you are demonstrate to the college that you are ready to have that college research experience, that you are ready to for with this higher level thinking. So without any further ado, I invite Stephen to take control of the screen and begin his presentation.
Yeah, excellent. Well, hey, Devesh, thank you so much for letting me join. I'm going to move into some slides as well. I use slides primarily because I know that my face isn't the thing that you guys are here for. So I think that the slides is probably the most effective. So hello everyone. I am Stephen Turban. I am a PhD student at Harvard Business School. I'm also the director and founder of Lumiere Education, and I was also a Harvard College student and graduated in a couple of years back studied statistics. So, and I will say I was also one of you guys, not too long ago, thinking about what can I do to make sure that I'm competitive in a world that's quite competitive, and especially when it comes to thinking about your broader profile. And one of the answers that I came to was around doing research. And I think today we're going to talk about Lumiere Research Scholars, which is a unique opportunity for students to work one-on-one or in a very small group with a research scholar at institutions like Harvard, like Oxford, and like Stanford. But before I dive into that, I kind of want to give you a bit of background for why I care about this. Why am I doing this? I'm working on my PhD. There's a lot of things that to be done. Why is this compelling for me? It actually goes back to my my family's history, which has been deeply affected by the opportunity to do research in higher education. So my great grandfather, who you guys can see in the middle, we've got similar noses. His name's Fritz Kahn. He was a famous science writer in Germany in the 1930s. He wrote about the human body as a machine. But Fritz also faced a difficulty in that he was Jewish in Germany in the 30s. And so as the Holocaust began, he began to face, and his family began to face, increasing persecution over the course of his life. He eventually tried to flee with his family, with my grandfather. And he only was able to flee actually because of the letter of a fellow researcher a friend of his who we learned through doing research and writing together, wrote him a letter. Albert Einstein is this guy. I'm sure many of you guys have heard of him, and Fritz escaped. So unfortunately, his son, my grandfather, was right at the point, actually really similar to the ages you guys were, 17, 18, he was 17. And as a result, family lost everything. He never got to study college. And so my grandfather kind of lived with a chip on his shoulder. He never felt like he achieved his true potential. So he moved to the United States, went from working class job to working class job, eventually moved to Hawaii, where my father grew up. And then right when my dad, again, was your age, was about to enter college, his dad passed away. And so my dad started asking this question: how could he live through his dad's memory? And one of the things that his father never got, which his grandfather did get, was access to higher education, in particular, diving into an area of intellectual interest and doing research. So my dad started doing research at a psych lab at the side, loved it, fell in love, worked in it for the next 5 years, eventually did a PhD. And he's actually retiring now after 30 years of being a tenured professor in the United States. And I reflect on my own experience. So I was an undergrad at Harvard College, studied statistics. And the most important experience for me, which really changed my trajectory, was working with this man on the bottom right, David Garvin. He's was a professor at HBS. He took me under his wing as a research mentee of his. And he's the reason that I decided to do a PhD, why I'm at HBS right now. So I know how much research and the act of mentorship can change people's lives. And so Lumiere is created in many ways to provide that opportunity for people like yourself, for top students around the world to work with the very best researchers on a research project. So I'll just say a little bit about that mission. So I've shared a little bit about my background, a student, at HBS right now, and I've shared a little bit about Lumiere's mission. And I think it's important to note, how much we are focused on that mission. We'll talk a little bit about the program and some of the specifics down the line. But I want to kind of start with that. And so let me just kind of frame up what today we're going to talk about now that I've given you a little bit of context. So today, first, we're going to talk about why does research matter? How can this be useful for your profile? And what specifically can you do about it with Lumiere or outside of Lumiere? The second question is, what is research? So it's this kind of amorphous concept. How do we understand what it is? What are the different segments of it? What type of research should you be doing? And then finally, we'll talk about Lumiere and the opportunity that Lumiere presents for students. And I'll push through and then I'll leave some time at the end. I hope to leave a lot of time at the end for questions, because I always find questions to be the most fun part. But let me start by saying, what does research do for your profile and why is it powerful? One of the big things that differentiated myself, I believe, when I was applying to Harvard as an undergrad, was I did research with a faculty member on the role of China in social media. Something that's a big topic now, but was not as big at the time. And I think that really differentiated because it showed an interest that I had in languages. I'd studied in Chinese, showed an interest that I had in doing research and an intellectual passion for something. But for you, what role would research play for you in admissions? I think there's 3 broad roles. So the first is that it's a differentiator. Very few students, apply to undergraduate programs with research experience. And just like Devesh said, this reflects a intellectual passion, intellectual curiosity. When you're saying, not only did I take in information, let's say on economics, but I wrote a paper on the effects of COVID-19 on economic policy, which many of our students are doing right now. That is a big difference. To say, I like economics, to say, I've actually done economics and I've shown something new for the world. So that's 1. 2, research undoubtedly builds your CV. So when you're applying to universities, when you're applying to jobs or grad school, showing that you've dove in deep into a question is one of the questions they're asking, because they're essentially looking at your application and they're saying that can this student do what we need them to do in order to succeed at our institution? And one of the things that they all need is higher level thinking. Can you think critically about a question? Can you analyze an issue? And can you come out with a unique answer? And so when you do research, you show that. And then finally, and I think this should not be understated. It's a big part of the reason that I am where I am today is by doing research directly with researchers, scholars, faculty members. You connect with future advocates. The three recommendation letters I got when I applied to Harvard again for the PhD program was from 3 different professors I did research with. And with Lumiere program, I think this is the exact type of opportunity that you get by working directly with a research scholar. But in general, research provides that opportunity for you to work directly with someone who then can advocate for you in the institution that they know best, or in the types of institutions they know best. That is at universities. So what roles research play in admissions? Differentiate yourself from other applicants, build your CV, and find advocates. Now, let's talk about what research is, because this is a question that I get a lot. When I was in high school and I was thinking about starting research, I kept on thinking about research as something that you did in a lab. And that absolutely is a form of research. So that's often a type of research we call lab-based research. It's common in places like biology, material science, but also common in fields like social psychology, where you're trying to understand, what's happening? Why do people act the way they do? And what can I learn about people? And you can do that in a lab-based research setting. So lab-based research is very much about asking the question of what is causal? If I change X variable, which then causes the experiment, how does this Y outcome change? How does my dependent variable change? So that's lab-based research. Quantitative research, which we have actually a number of students doing with Lumiere, and this is my focus as a data scientist researcher, is taking data sets that exist in the world or creating new data sets and asking new questions. So for example, I'll talk about a research paper that I wrote that I started actually as an undergrad. We look at the question of what happens when you change a office structure from a closed office, for example, you have cubicles, to an open office. Or you might ask the same question in the COVID-19 world. We might say, so what happens to people's communication on a team when you go from working in person to working virtually? And you can look at data sets, for example, an email data set, a Slack data set on immigration to answer that question. It really requires quantitative skills, and you're looking for external shocks to find causality. So the third segment of research is theoretical research. So this is the type of research that really involves deep individual thinking. It's quite personal, it's quite individual. Math is a good example of this. You're trying to think about a theory, you're trying to prove out something. The Fields medalist Ngo Cho talked about how he spent 7 years just thinking about one problem before he finally solved it. Theoretical research is very much around creating the baseline principle, starting from what we call first principles, to then address a problem. You also see it in economics, which of course is a mathematical component to it. But you also see it in more humanities places like political science, or even in art history. And finally, qualitative research. Qualitative research is really fun. And it involves going into a setting to try to understand how something's happening. That could take place in interviews, that could take the place of speaking directly with people. So this is a broad look at research, but let me just say a little bit about what the research process looks like for a student, and then we can talk about Lumiere as well, and how that we bring you along in this process. So I'm giving an example of the example research project that I did when I was an undergrad, and then afterwards. So I began by looking at this data set, analysis of people moving from a closed cubicle office to an open office. I then did a first write-up, and this is where Lumiere, where we're focused on helping you get to, and then we provide you support to get to here and here. This is initially my senior thesis that I wrote at Harvard. So then you go through a revision and submission process. And so, if you have any friends who are academics, this is a very intense process in which you are being scrutinized on every word you say, because they have that high rigor in science. If you're trying to prove something new in the world, it should be rigorous. And so that's this revision and submission process. And then finally, this is for us, external press and attention, and also external impact. For us, we focused on open offices. Here's some of the examples of some of the press around it. And it's one of the ways I think to have the most impact in the world is to bring a new idea into it. And so by doing research, you're doing that, bringing a new idea into the world And if people can latch onto it, you're going to have a really massive impact. And not only an impact broadly in the world, but also bringing back to the purpose of today, an impact on your profile by showing, hey, I've done something unique. And I've also built out something that has an impact on other people. So I'll talk a little bit about the Lumia Research Scholar Program. So we have, we are a program where we're looking for top students around the world. I'm sure many of you guys are some of those students. It's a 10-week program in which you work one-on-one with a leading researcher, oftentimes PhD students, junior faculty members, et cetera, on a research project that you and the faculty member co-design. So you are the one building out the research. It is your, and like in academic terms, you are first author of this research paper. Your research mentor is helping guide you along in that process and ultimately helping you create this research project. It's broken into 2 broad sections, this curriculum. First section, weeks 1 through 4, is focused on you identifying the topic, you diving into the topic, which is connected to your research mentor. They are going to provide for you all of the baseline knowledge that you need to know in order to address an important question in the field. And then weeks 5 through 10, you begin to build your own research paper and ultimately create this college level research paper. And just a quick note on research topics. So students come in, and we'll talk about this in a second, we represent almost every field of interest for students. So we range from physics to entrepreneurship, to economics, to data science, to chemistry. Any field really you can think of, we have mentors who work in those fields. So you bring in your interest when you apply. If you pass our bar, and we'll talk about that bar, then we pair you. And so this research mentorship program with Lumiere is all focused on you building out that research paper that's of your interest, right? And the expertise of the research mentor. We have applications due for this cohort in mid-August, August 17th. And then the cohort begins for 10 weeks, starting the week of August 30th. And it's all online, all digital. Yeah, very exciting. We've had, we have recently wrapped up a cohort, and we had we had a big response. So it was quite competitive, but we're excited to bring in another batch. So, I think a real opportunity for you all, and encourage you to apply. Here's some more research topics. So our topics range, again, from biology to chemistry to international relations to gender studies. If you are interested in a field, we have a research mentor who will support it. It may not be the exact question you're asking. So for example, if you're saying, what is the effect of COVID-19 on the economy of Pune? There's probably not a PhD student or a researcher in the world who looks at that specific question, but they may have the ability, they have the background to say, what is the effect of government policy broadly on the economy, or even what is the effect of a global pandemic on the economy? And then you, as a researcher, as a research scholar, add that piece of new knowledge, which is in the local context, for example, in Pune. But this is all to say there's a broad range of topics. And if there is a topic that you're of interest of, we encourage you to apply. So this is a competitive program. We are, our research mentors come from the top universities on earth. Places again like Harvard, Oxford, Stanford, Brown, Columbia. So we expect excellence from our students who apply as well. And so we're looking for a couple of things. We're looking for academic excellence. That's a baseline. But really, here's the things that you can do to stand out. And I just say this because, I really respect the Next Genius Foundation. So I want to give you guys a little bit of the background in terms of what is it that we really look for. We look for curiosity, and we look for ability to work independently, diligently. And so you can show curiosity in an application by giving me something specific that you're interested in. So someone who says, oh, I'm really interested in economics, that's interesting, but it doesn't necessarily reflect curiosity. Curiosity might be, we had this great applicant recently, which talked about the economics of of roti. So of like, of bread. So what is the cost of roti change over time, right? So that's a real curiosity. So you can show that by being quite specific in your application. I encourage that. Here's what's not required. You are not required to be experienced or an expert in your field. We understand, and this is true, for example, by the way, for many PhD programs as well. You should have some background, but the goal is that we will train you up in this area of interest and then build it out. So for example, many of our students are interested in how gender impacts how different people are influencing the world. This student who I'm thinking of, who's absolute top, top of her class, she has not studied gender studies before, and she's not expected to. We have an expert who's working with her on an independent project. She's looking at gender in finance. Her family's very connected to finance. But the same could be true of computer science. The same could be true as well of economics. So you don't need experience in order to apply. So here, let me just talk about these different programs. Most students will, we encourage most students to do the individual research class or the seminar-based research class. They're very similar. They're very similar programs. So the individual research class is the program that most students historically have done. So it's one-on-one, working with a mentor. Ultimately, you end up with a research paper. Seminar-based research class is almost identical, but you spend the first 4 weeks in a small group looking at the same research topic, and then each of you break out and do your own research papers. So the outcomes are exactly the same. You are developing a research paper. You are independently the author of that paper, but there is a shared component, a shared learning component at the beginning, and that is, that allows some co-learning for there. I'll just say two things on price. So, you guys can see the prices here. We are really a social enterprise focused on having impact in students' lives. So, our cost of tuition is really around supporting our research mentors and in their programs. And second is that because of that social mission, you will notice that our prices are, our tuition cost is much lower, and that's because we're taking most of these costs than even other programs that you guys might attend later. So there's a real focus on making this affordable for students, and we encourage you to apply. But we again, there is a cost. Finally, this advanced research class. This is really if you want to extend that learning to another setting, make this 10 to 20 weeks, or dive deeper in. If you have that desire for more in-depth inquiry, that's a great option for the students who would like that as well. So let me just share a little bit on the application process. We have a rigorous application process, in part because we have such talented research mentors. So we look for great students as well. We have a written application that's due August 17th. Encourage you guys to apply. We then, for select candidates, interview them, and you'll interview with a learning coordinator, a director of Lumiere, who's also a research mentor. We then offer conditional acceptances for students that we think meet our bar. And then given that you accept that conditional acceptance, we then give you the match pair. And with the approval of both sides, we then continue with the program. So this is not, this should reflect the rigor of our program. We are very serious about what we do. We're very serious about making this a life-changing and also a useful experience for you as a research scholar. That means that you are also expected to put in work and put in time. And so in this process, we look for that. We look for people who are prepared, and we look for students who are willing to put in the effort to make this happen. And so that's really what we're looking for. It's not meant to scare you. It should be encouraging because of the opportunity that we believe that you guys should have, but that we know that has expectations in order to achieve. So I will say one final thing, and then I think I'll move to questions and just talk a little bit about our research mentors and other students. So these are just a selection of research mentors. My own face is here, very photoshopped, as you can see. I need it. But just to talk about the profiles of our mentors, they come from places like, exactly, you can see here, Oxford, Stanford, Harvard. We have multiple Rhodes Scholars who are mentors. Dhruva Bhatt is a good friend. He's also been working with Lumiere. He's a Rhodes Scholar from India, also a classmate of mine at Harvard, an amazing guy. And our research mentors are really remarkable in their focus on mentorship and on building students. And just to think about, I just want to open the curtain a little bit for why do these mentors do it? It's because two reasons. One, they received this type of mentorship when they were your age, or when they were in college. And two, as a researcher, your goal is to become a faculty member. Your goal is to be a tenured professor. And your job is about supporting other learners, other scholars, other explorers. And so in many ways, this is a jumpstart for them in order to do that with talented students like yourself. So after this, Vesh will, I think, he's already shared out this application. I hope could share out the link to this so you can get a sense of that. But I think this is a good time for us to, I want to keep this short because I think that it's much more interesting to dive into questions and then start to talk for the questions that you guys have. Vesh, does that sound good?
Yes, I think that's perfect. And thank you so much for sharing all this information. It was really interesting to learn about the research process, and I enjoyed learning about it. So that's great. I see there are a lot of questions which are coming in. So maybe we can take it one by one. I'll start from the top. I want to learn how can I do some research activity in astronomy while in high school, and what and where can I do? So do you have a astronomy program, or do you have any suggestion for the student?
Yeah, so we have astrophysics, which is connected deeply to astronomy. And so that's an area that we absolutely do have researchers who focus on broader, how the universe functions. Yeah, it's absolutely, it's a great area of study.
Okay, great. How about economics? Do you have a program in economics?
Yeah, so so I can just say economics is one of our most popular, and we have a number of research scholars. So we have people ranging from organizational economists like Dhruva, who I just mentioned, to to finance, people focused on finance, people focused on corporate economics, to those focused on labor economics. So we have a really deep bench of researchers who are really remarkable when it comes to economics, and that's a real spike of expertise for us.
Okay. Would you call building a new machine or writing about a new machine or an instrument also part of a research program?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So that is the study of both engineering, computer science, really any, if you think about research, people often think about research as just being analytical, trying to understand what's happening in the world. But much of research is also creating something in the world, and then learning from that creation process. So absolutely, engineering is a part of that. Computer science is a part of that. So if that creation element is of interest, I would encourage you, but I would encourage you to look at fields where creating is a part of the research process. You're not going to find that, for example, in psychology, so you need to be strategic about that.
Okay. What is the age group for your programs?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So the age group, so we are open to high school students. We actually also have college and graduate students who apply to this program, but we separate out those. So as a high school student, you're not competing with non-high school students. We go as young as ninth grade, though frankly, most candidates we see are in the 10th, 11th, or 12th grade. And we do give a slight preference for older students, just because they lack the opportunity to then apply again in their high school time. But if you are a talented, if you're a talented 14, 15-year-old and you show that curiosity and academic excellence, we think you'd be great for the program. But you need, again, I think that you have to kind of look at yourself and say, can I excel at this type of program?
Okay. Can you elaborate a little more on the application process once again? And I'll also just type down the application form in the chat box. Meanwhile, you can just talk about the application process once again.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for sharing that. I mean, I could even show it if you guys would like.
Yes.
Why don't you send it to everyone, and then I can also go quickly over it for people. So the application process is a couple of steps. So the first step is an application itself. So this application involves a couple of questions. It's not too long, but long enough to show that you have a commitment and interest in these areas. It asks you what fields you're interested in among the options that we provide for this cohort. And then it asks you to talk a little bit about your own background. So for you, I would take a look at the application form, and we really encourage students to apply. We had one student that was really a pity who applied, didn't put much effort into the application, wrote a few sentences, maybe 2-3 sentences, and we didn't offer them a admission for that cohort, and their parent reached out to us and said, my son has done X, Y, and Z, has created his own water purifier and based out of different materials. He's an amazing candidate, but it was hard for us to see that just from the few sentences. So we encourage you guys when you apply to spend some time thinking about it, and put some time into it. We then interview candidates. There's a question around the percentage. We take a relatively small percentage. It actually shifts cohort to cohort, but most recently it was in the range of 15% of our candidates. But cohort to cohort that changes and depends on our research mentors as well. So it's hard to say. I wouldn't pin too much to that number. But then the interview process is very important. Sharing about your interests, sharing about your passions, and that's a critical part of the next step.
Okay, so Stephen, are there any prerequisites for joining the program? Because we have students from grade 9 or grade 10 who are a little younger right now.
Yeah.
So do you suggest that they do something beforehand? Do have some research activities?
We don't have explicit prerequisites. I will say for the more technical areas, so for example, computer science or let's say statistics or math, there's going to be some expectation of a background knowledge, because we'll have two sets of candidates, one who's, especially if we're doing research, we're kind of going to the next level, there should be some background there. But for most fields, really what matters is intellectual curiosity, not necessarily having that background. So, if you're a 9th grader or a 10th grader, and you have shown that you have that passion and curiosity, and you've looked at something yourself, I think I would encourage you to apply. If your interest is computer science and you've never coded before, I would probably spend some time first coding, so that you don't want to spend time with a PhD student at Harvard University going through for loops. That's just not a good use of their time. It's not a good use of your time. But by and large, we encourage those who have an interest to apply, because you can ramp up very quickly in most fields.
Okay, great. We have a question on will the research program help students get into Indian colleges? So let me take that one. So the application for most Indian colleges are not so holistic at the moment. We mostly have entrance exams for colleges like IITs and NITs or other colleges which look only at your academic score. But at the same time now, the new generation liberal arts colleges like Ashoka or OP Jindal or Kriya University have started looking at applications in a more holistic manner, and they are considering programs like Lumiere or other profile building activities, other extracurricular activities. So yes, I'm not sure in which grade you are, but as over the next few years, we'll see more and more colleges taking a holistic approach towards entrance and admissions, and activities like this will become more important as you work on your profile.
Yeah. So I see a couple of questions around areas. So maybe I can just quickly go through those because
Sure.
specific questions for one. So statistics, sports statistics, absolutely. The eyesight statistics, for example. Beautiful thing about statistics is that you can approach using different data science statistical methods for many different areas. So if you're interested in sports statistics, it's a great area, and we have mentors who focus on broadly those areas or broadly area statistics who can guide you in that research. I saw a question around mathematics and data science. Yes, absolutely, you can address those issues. We saw an area around biology. Yes, again, psychology, we have a deep roster of mentors from places like Harvard and Stanford. Actually, Matt Cummins, who was on that slide, is from Stanford, is psychology. Nanotechnology, that's a form of engineering. We do have that covered. So for most of my biology, yes, for these areas, again, so, if it is something that is a recognized area of study, then, we have research mentors who support that. If it's something that is not necessarily an area of study, so for example, you're interested in, let's say making the best cup of coffee, that's not necessarily something that a university, though it is, important expertise, it's not necessarily something that a university has research on. And so as a result, we would not support. Program in art, yes, art, primarily those things like art history, not necessarily performance art. So that again, with that distinction, the research into art, understanding art, but not necessarily the performance aspect of it. Yeah. Wow, there's a, let me say, so cost fees, I can just shoot that up again. That should be, by the way, in the form that you see. It's 2,200 USD for the primary program. If you begin in a seminar program, which has the same outcomes, the cost is reduced slightly to 1950 USD. Okay, let's talk a little bit about publication. I think that's an important one. So let me just say what the expectations are for grad school. Okay, so not even university, What's the expectation for grad school? So of, let's say about 1,000 people that applied to Harvard Business School for their PhD program, I would say 5 had published a research paper when applying. So the expectation is just not there, So I think this is a little bit of a misconception that research is only valuable for your application if you've published it. That's totally not true. That's absolutely not true. What we do in this program, however, if you have the ability to push your paper to that level, we support you in that. So we have a full team that's dedicated to providing opportunities in high school and college journals for you to apply your research. But that is a cherry on top. What really is valuable here is the showing of the intellectual pursuit, the letter of recommendation, the fact that you've created something. That's really going to matter most to these institutions. And then the publishing is a nice thing to have, but it's not. It's actually not the core of the program.
Stephen, can you talk a little bit more about the time commitment on a weekly basis and the overall program timeline?
Absolutely. So the time commitment per week is 5 to 8 hours per week. There is the center of the program is a one-on-one class for the one-on-one program between you and your research mentor that lasts roughly an hour, sometimes more, sometimes a little less. And then students are expected to spend 5 to 8 hours outside, just like, for example, in the Oxford tutorial system at Oxford. Much of the time is spent you reading, diving into it, writing reflections on it, your research mentor giving you feedback to that. This program runs for 10 weeks. So in this case, for this cohort, starting in late August, early September, running through early November. This is a great one. So I'm already in the midst of working on a research paper. This is that's impressive, very Actually I'm seeing two of these around. If you already are doing research and would like to get support in that specific area, and we also encourage you to apply. What that would mean is that your program would jumpstart a little bit earlier, where the first 3-4 weeks are about identifying the question, getting people deep into the field. If you already have that, then we can spend more of that time, 8, 9, 10 weeks, focusing on a specific paper and bringing it to the top level. So it's a very effective area.
We have a curious bunch here. So many questions.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's really good. I mean, guys, this is the curiosity that we need in the application. I encourage you guys.
Okay.
Will these research programs be effective only for Harvard or other universities in school? Maybe I'll answer a little bit individually. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. So for the United States, I'll speak for the United States. And I think this is also true for most UK schools. Showing that you have dove into an area of intellectual interest for you just shows that you are at the college level. You're ready to take on. So that applies for I think almost all schools. Now, if you're applying to something very specific, like an art school, will research in nanotechnology help you? Probably not. And for schools that are not competitive, in which they accept anyone, then then building out your profile is actually not that important as a use of time. But I think that's probably not what. But yes, absolutely, research is important for schools that go beyond just Harvard. I would love to hear your thoughts on that, though.
Yes, of course. So I just missed that question, but what I can understand is, does this program be effective only for Harvard? Well, of course not. I think these research programs are applicable or help you strengthen your profile or to differentiate yourself to whichever college which follows a holistic application or a holistic admissions approach. Almost all colleges in the US consider a holistic admissions approach, whether you are a STEM student or a humanities student or a business student. They are looking, having a research in your name, having a publication in your name actually has a lot of weightage. And of course, in the UK as well, when you show the depth of your knowledge in a particular stream, in a particular field of study, it does make a big difference. Yes.
Yeah, I think there's a question around, how do you get in touch with a faculty member if not through Lumiere? That's a great question. Part of why we created Lumiere is to make this opportunity easily accessible, because frankly, it can be difficult to get it, to find these types of opportunities without the structure in place. With that said, if you find someone research particularly interesting, it's always reasonable to reach out to them, and people really appreciate it. So I encourage you guys of course, I encourage you guys to join us, but I also encourage you guys to reach out to people that you find their work interesting. I think that's an important skill to learn, and people respond well to it.
Stephen, can you tell, so I just saw this, your application form. Can you tell about how do applicants differentiate themselves?
Yeah.
What do you look for in an applicant?
Absolutely. So I would say the word that I'm looking for is specificity. So when you are applying for this program, really any program, but this program in particular, and you say you're interested in, let's say, economics, be specific about it. What is it that you enjoy about economics? And give me an example. Talk about the first time that you bought something, or the first time that you saw that someone did something irrational. Why do they do that? Giving the more and more specific you can be, the more effective you'll be for the application. And then again, there's another question on cost. So the cost is $2,200 for a individual research program, $1,950 for seminar program. We offer, for this cohort, we do not offer financial aid, unfortunately, given the cost go almost entirely to our research mentors. And so we would be eating costs at that point. So, but yeah.
Okay. I'm just typing in an answer of a couple of questions. Meanwhile, you can just pick a question and answer.
I wrote for this research activity. Yeah. So I think the more details and links for the program. So I encourage you guys to look at the application form. That's one. Devesh, I believe we will send out the brochure. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I encourage you to look through the brochure. That's another great way to learn. And if you have any questions, I encourage you guys. I will share my our email address here.
Yes.
That's either myself or one of my colleagues will respond to that. So this is a great way as well. If you have any specific questions that we don't answer today, I should share that email. So that's another great way to learn about the program. Yeah, and to talk about cohorts. So I saw a couple questions. So we run cohorts roughly 5 to 6 times per year. Each of them roughly the same, very similar programs. So maybe 5 times per year, I think, is the right cadence. So if you do not apply for this fall cohort, there is an opportunity to apply later. What you can do is you can apply for this cohort and then indicate you would like a deferral into a later cohort. That's an option, and we encourage that because then you keep on our radar, and then that actually adds to your application going in the future. For the question on going from individual research program to advanced research program, you absolutely can do that. Start off with this 10-week program and then bring it later if you desire to do so. And that's something we've seen a number of times. Do you have a cohort starting in March? I think that's a bit of a to be determined. We have cohorts starting in the spring for sure. We'll have to check back to see if it's March or some other date.
Okay. Do you have any program in literature as well?
We do. Yeah, actually we do. We have some one of our mentors, I'll just brag about our mentors because they're so cool, is this amazing woman, MG. She studied literature at Harvard College. She's doing her PhD back at Harvard. She focuses on different forms of literature. This is not what you need to study, but one of the things that she did was she wrote a paper on Samwise Gamgee from Lord of the Rings, and she investigated him for like 6 months. So she is so cool. So absolutely, we have people doing literature, and they're great.
Wonderful.
The interview process, yeah. Interview process. So the interview is really around identifying your interests and showing enthusiasm for research. So what we see as being very effective is when a student talks about specific research areas. So we'll ask a question essentially like, tell me about your research interests. We've read it in your application, but tell us some more. And when students say, some students say something like, I just love chemistry and I've loved it because remember the first day I looked at a shampoo bottle and I just started reading all the chemicals and I said, why are these chemicals interacting together? This is a very personal example of someone diving into something and finding interesting. So the interview process will be a number of questions about your research interests, your academic backgrounds, and the best way to prepare is to think critically about what your interests are. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, excuse me. So Radhika, I see your question. I'm sorry about not answering earlier. Yeah, absolutely. So you could for sure investigate plastic consumption in high school as a research topic, and that would fall under environmental studies. And then you will get a Lumiere certificate at the end. So that will be granted to all tall scholars. And there's also a Lumiere symposium in which we invite selected students to present to esteemed faculty. Is it a really beneficial, like a must-do program for 9th graders? It's a great question. So here's what I'll say. Is it a must-do? I mean, really no profile building is a must-do. So I wouldn't frame it that way. The way I would frame it is, how can you be as strategic as possible about your profile? So if you are thinking about your profile and you want academics to be a part of that, starting research early is a very useful way to do that. Because if you can say by 9th grade, I started a project, and then by 11th grade, I built this project into X, Y, and Z, that is really remarkable. And in many ways, that's an opportunity that if you start earlier, you don't have if you start later. But I think it's a strategic choice for you and your family. Where is everyone typing their questions so that Stephen can view them? That's clear. It's very meta. Maybe share your email ID. Yeah, I will share out my, I think I just said at the end, here is my email. And so you guys feel free to welcome me, send me a message as well. But frankly, either of those two emails work. And I encourage you to reach out to either, for either. Will Lumiere meant to provide a letter of recommendation? So this is a great question. Let me answer this by just giving context. So every single mentor, in order to get where they are, has asked dozens of people to write them letters of recommendation. So it is a deep culture within academia that if you work with someone and they ask you to write a letter of recommendation, that they will reciprocate and write that letter. So that is something that we have seen for many of our research scholars. Some scholars don't ask for letters of recommendation, but it's definitely something that you can ask for. We expect, we cannot force anyone to write anyone a letter of recommendation, but we expect that almost all of our mentors will say yes and be very excited about it.
So one quick update for all of you. See, in the email that was sent to you yesterday, a reminder email, we already have this form link and a brochure of Lumiere education. So you can just take a look at that and you can learn more. And of course, feel free to write to Stephen personally or on the contact email ID to learn more about the program.
Yeah. Poonam gave a good question. What if a student has already written a paper in economics and needs help in publishing, shortlisting a journal? Yeah, we can support. I mean, I think that going through this program is a way to do that. Poonam, one thing that I will say is that if you are just writing a research, this is for anyone, just writing research paper based upon your own, without guidance from a mentor, you are probably, unless you somehow have this amazing background, writing a paper that is not in the exact direction that a research journal would want to accept. And so I've seen this issue a number of times. A student says, oh, I should do research. And then they go, to a local village and they collect some questions and they come back, they write something and they think it's a research paper. That's not a research paper. It's not contributing. So the value of this program is that it brings you along in that process. And yeah, absolutely. If you come in with an existing, we actually have one student who's doing this right now. They have a existing paper they've written on graphite. It's a chemistry paper, material science. And we're working with that student to bring it to the next level. Let's turn the class. Yep, this program, you do have to pay for this program, and that the costs are in the brochure. So researching. While we have some help by doing the research project. Yeah, absolutely. So the whole structure of the program is such that you are working individually with a research mentor who is guiding you in the research project. So that means that every week you're checking in, every week they're helping you look at your work, giving you feedback, providing direction for it. And that is exactly, by the way, what happens when you do a PhD. So you have a faculty member, a senior faculty member who's guiding you in the process. They're not doing the work for you, right? But they're guiding you and making sure that you're successful. And that's exactly what this program does. What does research include? I see this question, what does research include? It's a good question. It's big. I would say the answer is it depends on type of the research. We talked about four types: lab-based research, quantitative research, qualitative research, and theoretical research. For each of those types of research, they include different things, frankly. So I would put the question back to you and say, what type of research are you interested in? And then we can give some more specifics.
So we have just about 5 minutes left for the session, and we have almost more than a lot of questions that we might not be able to take right now. So I recommend all of you to just note down the email ID which I just provided in the chat box, and feel free to connect with Stephen directly and shoot your questions directly at him. And the recording of this session is also available on our YouTube channel. So if you missed out a few minutes, if you missed out the beginning of the session, or if you want to just watch it again, it's available on the YouTube channel. And I just sent the link in the chat box again. So please feel free to watch that. Maybe a couple of questions, Stephen, that you can take now.
Yeah. So there's a question earlier about scores, and we do look at your scores, of course, but we don't use that as a bar for cutoff. Again, if you write a really compelling statement around your interest in a field, that will count for more than getting a perfect score on SAT. I see a lot of questions around, hey, I'm currently doing this thing. I'm researching a device related to breast cancer, for example. I'm researching X other thing. Could I fit for this program? The answer is, that's great. That's an example of your research interest already. Write about that, and we can bring a mentor to you to work with you to develop that specific area. So the cost of the program is $2,200 for the individual program, $1,950 for the seminar based. The difference between the advanced and individual program, advanced program is if you want to spend more time or stretch this out over a longer period of time. So it's just a more intensive option. Many of our college students take this option because they have that desire for a bit more time with a research mentor. But we do encourage high school students, if you want to dive deeper into a topic and really bring the research to the next level, then you can be a good fit for the academic program. The research topic is decided jointly between the student who comes in with an interest and the research research mentor who helps guide the interest. So you can have an interest, but if it's in something that's already been answered, then it's not going to be effective as a research question. Ideal academic. Yeah, ideal academic percentage. Yes, so you should be writing your IGCSE results in the form. Yeah, we're looking for your, any recent grades that you can use to reflect your academic ability. So if you're an IB, that's your IB scores. If you are doing, IGCSE, that would be those results. If you're doing, whatever it might be your percentile in the class, whatever it is. So anything that gives an idea, and then explain after us the context for it. Vish, I see you smiling. There's a lot.
Yeah, I think we need to be wrapping up this session. We are almost coming towards the end of the time, and maybe any final word of advice for all the students who are looking to apply to the program?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say this, like, first of all, definitely mention that you listen to this. I think that, we'll pay attention. We care a lot about Next Gene Foundation and, honor that. The other thing is, I really encourage you guys to apply, and you guys should think about this as a launching pad for your interest, not as the end of your interest. So use this to think about what you're interested in, what you like to research. Join us in this program, please apply. And then think about that as the beginning of this research topic, not the end. And that's going to build your profile much more deeply than any of these programs, whether it's Lumiere or any of the other programs that you look at today will do. So I was really impressed by this group, by these questions. They were great. And thank you so much for having me, and thank you for the Next Genius Foundation for all the work that you guys do, which is really, really remarkable.
Great. Thank you so much, Stephen, for spending your time here and for sharing all the information. For all of you who joined us today, thank you so much for joining. And we'll share the brochure with you. And if you missed out a part of the video, the recording is available on the YouTube. We'll send it to you across via email as well. For any questions, please feel free to reach out to us, or for any questions about Lumiere, please feel free to reach out to Stephen directly. Thank you so much. Take care. Yeah. Bye.
Thank you guys. Thank you.